Show me the science that if I have 5 kids and you've diagnosed them all as ADD or ADHD, that there's something in their brain chemistry, their biochemistry, something in their body that will prove that they have this mental illness, this disease that justifies this prescription medication or this medical treatment. Now, if they have cancer, you can find it. Hepatitis, it's there. Herpes, it's there. Chickenpox, smallpox, mumps, measles, ulcers. Every other medical condition that's a real medical condition, we can find in the body. Can we find ADD in the body? Well, with millions of kids being diagnosed, stigmatizing them and changing the outcome of their life, I would assume that there's a lot of science to prove what school teachers, social workers, state authorities, medical doctors, pediatricians in particular, are suggesting.
At this time, we do not have a diagnostic test for ADHD. Therefore, the validity of the disorder continues to be a problem.
In 1998, the National Institute of Mental Health held what's called a Consensus Development Conference, in which the aim was to push the diagnosis of ADHD and to push the stimulant drugs. They had 30 experts come together to address an objective panel which would then give a consensus as to what the issues were. And the result was a consensus statement which said that ADHD was controversial, that it had no proven biological basis, that there was a risk of over-medicating our children, and that stimulant drugs have a lot of serious adverse effects.
We do not have an independent diagnostic and valid test, such as a biological test or such as a blood test.
I still want to get to the other part of the question, which is just a description of what you might be looking for. Okay. But before you go on to that, it sounds a little bit like you're saying that the definition is a little like the Supreme Court's definition of pornography, which is you know it when you see it.
No,
I'm concerned with it.
We're going to disagree, and I would like any member of the panel to describe a typical ADHD in terms of symptomatology. Mark, would you like to? Since you see them in your practice.
I think the panel has been frank, and the difficulties here are immense in terms of
they were caught in a lie at the consensus conference.
It is hard. It's very hard to know how to answer this question. These kids, in my experience, when you see these kids, they are, several standard deviations different in terms of they cannot sit still, they cannot attend, they cannot, even when they are as if driven by a motive. There are some good clinical descriptions of these kids. I think part of the problem is in the community. When you are a physician and somebody comes to you as a parent and says, my child might have attention deficit disorder, it's very difficult to know what to do. And how much confirmation do you need? Do you need a teacher who also who sees many kids and says, this kid is 2 standard deviations different from the other kids in my classroom? The parent says this kid is different, and and then even if you say this child is different, you have immense problems with trying to say, why is this child different? Is this child being abused? Is this child lead poisoned?
As of the consensus conference, they confessed they had no evidence that it was a disease.
I think, I don't think the panel is saying anything different, although we said it in more sophisticated ways, as the diagnosis is a mess. But there is we all have a belief that we are dealing with a very serious core problem, and that we have a diagnosis that allows us to communicate and gives us research, generates sort of ideas for research. And I think, I think the part of the problem is the profession keeps changing the diagnosis. We have DSM-4, the latest thing, but we have no guarantee that DSM-5 won't give us yet another diagnosis.
We forced them under heavy questioning to admit that all the children who were showing up with brain abnormalities in fact had long drug histories, not just even stimulants, but a variety of different kinds of drugs. And we know from animal experiments that many psychiatric drugs, including the stimulants, can cause permanent changes in the brain.